Good evening. This is Wednesday, September 7th. Um, my name is Douglas Griffin. This is my Wednesday night Bible study. We're studying the book of John. We started in John 1. We're now in John chapter 9. Just started John chapter 9. Um, Jesus has been wrestling with the Pharisees um, because he has like 6 months to turn them around. At this point in Jesus's ministry, they've just had the Feast of Tabernacles, which happens around October. This is year 3 of his ministry, and he ministered for 3.5 years. So he'll be ministering until Passover and March the next year. Then they're going to put him on the cross, and his time will be done. So he's focused solely on the Judea area, specifically Jerusalem. But he'll be traveling around that area for the next 6 months and really focusing on trying to save the Pharisees' lives because they're going to reject him and end up going to hell. And so they're going to put him on the cross and just not believe who he is. So he's been arguing with them. And John chapter 9 actually takes place probably 3 months after John chapter 8. So we just had the Festival of Tabernacles, and what's coming up is the Festival of Lights, the Feast of Dedication, which is Hanukkah. We call it Hanukkah today. So that's what they're just about to celebrate. We'll see that in John chapter 10, that this is the conversation that's happening on the way, basically, to the temple to celebrate Hanukkah. So, so let us begin. I'm going to wait just another minute. Um, Jesus is about to run into the blind man and heal him, which starts the biggest controversy of his career so far. It causes the most consternation among the Pharisees, and it's kind of the thing that prompts them to say, okay, we really do have to crucify him. Here he's healing blind people right in front of everybody. Hey, Susie. Okay, so it's been 2 minutes. Normally, I've got 2 minutes, and then it cuts out. And if it goes past 2 minutes, that's a good sign that it's going to stay. Uh, so we'll see. Okay, so let us begin at the beginning. No, let me find the document there. That's not it. Come on, you can do it. There it is. Okay, so John chapter 9, verse 1. So it says, now as Jesus passed by, so it's 2 months later, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Excellent point of discussion here, because the disciples were under the belief that if a bad thing happened to somebody, it had to be as the result of sin. So, and the fact that he was born blind, which that's a huge punishment. There's other diseases you could have and things that you can find cures for, but there's two things. There's no cure for paralysis. I guess three things: leprosy and blindness. They thought those are the big sins. If you're paralyzed, because you're a guy who's been paralyzed since birth, that Jesus ministers to at one point, and the thought was you must have committed some horrible sin because there's no cure from that, right? Blind, no cure for that. And if you have leprosy, so he was born blind. He didn't even become blind, he was acting stupid and got drunk and fell off a cliff. No, he was born blind. So either he sinned in the womb or his parents sinned, and his parents' sin was passed down to him. Um, so who sinned? This man or his parents? And he was born blind. Now, I'm going to talk about generational sin, um, which the disciples believed in. So it's not a crazy thing that the parents could do something bad enough that the consequences of their sin would come on the child. Okay, so where did they get this belief from? By the way, just, as most of you know, Jesus says neither. This is not generational sin. There wasn't, he didn't sin. The parents didn't sin. That's not what this is. Okay. But where did they get that from? In Exodus chapter 20, verse 1, it says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven or above, or that is the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. So we're going to dissect that. This specific consequence that God says I'm visiting is limited to those who commit idolatry. He spends a lot of time describing the type of sin that will get this sort of consequence. So let's look at it again. I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. If you've been listening on Sundays, we know that the Egyptians worshipped all kinds of gods. And half of the reason for God sending the plagues on Egypt in order to free the children of Israel was, it says, he calls it judgment on their gods, to show these are not gods. You think they're gods, controlling the sun and controlling the water and controlling all these things, and you're wrong. These aren't gods. And so the children of Israel has just come out of there. This is Exodus. They've just exited from there, and they have been also buying into this idea of gods for at least 200 years. Some people say 400 years. So for however long they were in Egypt, for the past 200 to 400 years, they had bought into this. There had been no communication, basically, between God and this people. So all they heard every day was about God of this, God of that, Ra and Isis, and that's all they'd heard. And God was trying to drum out of them the idea that they were gods. He keeps warning them, do not go mix with these nations, because they believe in all these idols and they believe in all these other gods. And so that is the strongest belief that he's got to get out of them. So this is the severest punishment. So it says, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the hand of bondage, where you were serving all those gods. It says, you shall have no other gods before me. Don't do that. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above or that is in the earth beneath. So don't make a giant sun or a giant star. Don't make a likeness of a fish or anything do not make a likeness like that, or anything that is in the heaven above or in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Next verse, you shall not bow down to them nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, I'm a jealous God, and I will visit the iniquity of the father. What iniquity is he talking about? Of worshiping these idols. How do I know? I'll show you later. But that's what he's talking about. So if you do any of these things, and he spends 5 verses describing all the things that he's talking about, then I will visit the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. The word visiting the iniquity. Okay, I will allow those consequences to come upon the children. Because if you're worshiping idols, they're going to pick up what you're doing. Now, he's talking about 2 things, and so we've got to be clear. The consequences will fall on them, but also they're going to pick up your habits, and therefore they're going to be judged and have consequences simply because they're also going to be doing it. If you're doing it, they're going to say you're doing it. Why wouldn't they? We pick up the habits, things that we see our parents do. So if you're worshiping them, that's going to fall on them. It's going to fall on them. And the consequences will go at least 3 or 4 generations before they'll realize, I need to stop this, because look how God has punished my great-great-grandfather, my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father. And horrible things have happened because they've been worshiping these idols. It's going to take that long for the consequences to change you. So the consequences are going to come upon you. So listen to this. For I, the Lord your God, am jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. So he's saying, those who hate me, that's who get these consequences. You have to hate God and be worshiping these idols. He's really specific. Not just, well, if you happen to steal a cow in the middle of the night, your children for the next 100 generations are going to get. No, those who hate me, because that's what you're doing. So he's really specific. Those who are serving idols and are hating me and are serving idols, because you're not serving an idol by accident. You don't just make a golden calf accidentally. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So this is who he's talking to. If you're making these idols, if you're worshiping, if you're making a carved image, if you're serving them, I will visit the iniquity upon those who hate me. He says, for the third, fourth generations of those who hate me. But I'll be showing mercy to thousands of people, of generations, to those who love me and keep my commandments. So he's contrasting, if you love me, then mercy flows on all your people. If you hate me and you're worshiping these idols, then you get a horrible thing. So he's contrasting there. Now, in Deuteronomy, Moses, so that's when he first gave the law. In Exodus is when they first showed up in the wilderness. In Deuteronomy, Moses is summing up. Here's everything that happened while we were in the wilderness. So he reminds me again, Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 1. And Moses called all Israel and said to them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and judgments which I speak in your hearing today, that you may learn them and be careful to observe them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us in Moab. So that's already passed. He's now just summing it up. Let me remind you of everything God said, so you don't forget. The Lord did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, those who are here today, all of us who are alive. What does that mean? So the 10 Commandments and all the things that he gave, that was a specific covenant just to us. He didn't make this covenant with the fathers. This covenant was made with us who are here today. So who is this for? And you're like, what are you saying? The 10 Commandments are not for us? Just hold on. Okay, so this specific way that God is saying, these are the things I'm going to hold you accountable for, I am making with you specifically today. That's who's God who made this for. Not even our fathers. What? Okay. So the law was designed for that set of Jews, not even didn't apply to the Jews who had come before them, that set of the children of Israel and their children. It says, and in Galatians chapter 3, verse 10, it says, For as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. So there is a curse if you don't do it. For it is written, curses everyone who does not continue in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them. So there was a curse that came on those people, and the curse was death. If you erred in any part of the law, then death came to you. That was the curse. Romans chapter 5, verse 13 says, For until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed when there is no law. What does that mean? So until the law, people were sinning, but these specific sins were not counted against people because they didn't know about those specific things. And yet sin was still in the world and people were dying. So Paul is trying to say to the Romans, the law came at a specific time. Before that, people were not responsible for these specific laws. There were other specific laws that people were responsible for. God made a covenant with Adam. There was a covenant with Noah. There was a covenant with Abraham. There was a covenant with Moses. And under each of those different time periods, God said, here's what you're responsible for. Here's what I'm going to really get you on. So there was still punishment, but not for these specific laws that was revealed to Moses. So it says, for until the law, sin was in the world. It's not like people weren't sinning, but not imputed when there was no law, meaning these specific things weren't counted against them. He says, nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses. People still died because of sin, because the wages of sin is death. Meaning, again, before sinned, he and Eve were going to live forever, and their children are going to live forever. And God says, remember, the day you eat this fruit, that's when you'll start to die. So from Adam on, because of Adam's sin, sin was in the world. It's not like there was no sin. Um, Nevertheless, death reigned, and therefore, because of sin, death reigned from Adam to Moses. It says, even over those who had not sinned according to the likeness of the transgression of Adam. So God told Adam a specific thing, and he got in trouble for a specific thing. After Adam, people got in trouble for whatever God told them, which we'll go over. And then when we get to Moses' day, God tells them something specific. And Moses tells them, what God told us, he didn't tell our fathers. He told that just to us. So we're responsible for these set of things. Under Jesus, we're responsible for the set of things that he told us to do. So I will explain all of this. So even those who had not sinned according to the likeness of the transgression of Adam, who was a type of him who was to come. Now, Genesis chapter 2, verse 16. So there's Adam, sin, Noah, there's Abraham, there's Moses, all these different generations. God told them specific things and held them responsible for what he told them. Genesis chapter 2, verse 16. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may eat freely. So he commanded the man. Here's a commandment. Here's my law I'm giving to you. You may eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. So there's no death because you haven't disobeyed me yet. There's no sin. And if you just don't sin, you'll be cool. But here's the thing I'm telling you not to do. So he didn't say don't go to Paris. He didn't say don't get drunk and walk out in the rain. He didn't say just don't eat of the tree. That's the one thing that I'm going to hold you responsible for. And that's it. You just have one thing not to do. Okay. When it got down to Moses, there's like 638. Let me spell out everything because you people are crazy. Okay, but starting with Adam, there's just one thing you don't have to do. All right. So the tree of knowledge of good and evil you should not eat, for the day you leave it, you shall surely die. So as we know, he didn't pay attention. After Adam, between Adam and Noah, the way to get into God's good graces was to walk and talk with him. It's like, so how do I know what to do? Because God came to Adam and said, here's a specific thing. But you think after Adam, how do we know what not to do? Because we're only responsible for the thing that God tells us not to do, right? That's the thing he's going to really get us on, ding us on. You were supposed to walk and talk with God and ask him personally. So between Adam and Noah, people had the opportunity to have their own personal relationships with God. I mean, like literally, not like we have a personal relationship with God, but I mean, like literally, God would come and walk and talk with you if you wanted that. Genesis 4, chapter 26 says, and as for Seth, which was Adam's third child, right? To him also his son was born, and he named him Enosh. And then men began to call on the name of the Lord. So starting with Seth, men began to call on the name of the Lord and talk to God. Hey, Lord, how you doing? And God would say, hey, what's up? And they would talk, and God would say, by the way, you wearing white after Labor Day, I'm not for that. And then they would personally know what God didn't want them to do. And then it was up to them to do it, right? Cain's line, they went off and said, we're not thinking about God. We're going to make our own cities. We're going to do our own thing. We're not going to ever consult with God. And so you have two sets of people, the sons of, what they call the sons of men and the sons of God. These were the two sets of people during that time. For example, Genesis chapter 5, verse 22 says, after he begat Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had sons and daughters. Now, before that, he did not walk with God till he had a son named Methuselah. He says, I need to be walking with God because this child's going to drive me crazy. So after he begat Methuselah, then Enoch walked with God for 300 years. He had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. So he had Methuselah when he was 65, and then he walked with God for 300 years after that. So he was 365. It says, and Enoch walked with God, verse 24 of Genesis chapter 5, and he was not, for God took him. So he didn't do anything. He walked with God every day for 300 years, and the Bible's implying he did not see death because God just took him. Because God would say, don't do that. And he'd go, okay. And then be walking, and God said, hey, don't pick that up, leave that. Don't eat that. What's wrong with you? Spit that out, right? And then, okay. And so he just obeyed God the whole time. And the implication is we don't have a record of his death. God took him on into heaven. Okay, so they're contrasting in Genesis. So here are the people walking and talking with God and doing whatever God says, and that's how they would know what to do. God would tell them personally. So he didn't give a specific commandment. They had God like just showing up, in the classroom, like your mama just showing up in the classroom, and then you suddenly change your behavior. So God would just show up. The other people, with the line of Cain, we don't want to hear from God. So what happens? Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. Because remember it says that the sons of men began to mix with the sons of God. The sons of God is Seth's line, who are following God. The sons of men of Cain's line, who are not following God. Then they begin to mix, and then they lose it. So it says in Genesis chapter 6, verse 5, then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart were only evil, continually. So that's there was not a moment they would say, what evil can I do? That's all. Every intent, just getting up and it's like, ooh, I'm wore out from last night, but I'm going to kick it up again. Because you only live once. YOLO, and just continually. That's all they did. So God says, I have to wipe them out. They had the opportunity to walk and talk with me between Adam and Noah. Nope, they're not doing it. They're just thinking what evil thing they can do. So he wipes them out, right? Except he preserves Noah, because Noah's the only person actually listening to God. God would have spoken to anybody who was listening, but no one was even thinking about God by this point. So then Genesis chapter 8, verse 20, it says, then Noah built an altar to the Lord. So this whole idea of building an altar and sacrificing an animal on it had been around. It started when Adam and Eve sinned, and suddenly God clothed them those animal skins. That means they killed an animal and sacrificed it for their sin, and then clothed themselves in the skin of the animal they had killed. So the idea of the animal sacrifice was not a new thing, been around. Noah built an altar. So Genesis 8:20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar, because he knew we are wrong. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. So again, he's giving them the opportunity. You've seen how I have judged you if you just sin continually, if you just always sin. You see how I just wiped everybody out? There's a flood account in every culture all over the world. Everybody has a flood story because everybody was aware, starting with Noah's on. God will judge us big time if we just sin continually. So between Noah and Abraham, there was a general thing, try to worship God and get on his good side, because sinning is bad, sinning is wrong. So they knew that. Now, I'm skipping to Romans chapter 1, verse 18. It says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. Wherever you are, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. They know there's a God out there. They're in their heart. They can see the stars, but they're saying, no, they're suppressing the truth. We don't want to believe it. So they're going back like the way of Cain, right? That whole group is saying, no, we're not going to talk to God. So whether God has specifically given that person the law and spelled it out, all God's requiring at that point is to be acknowledged. Not acknowledging me as sin. Not believing in God is the sin. Believing there is no God and I'm my own God and I decide what I do, that's the sin. So that's the ungodliness. They suppress the truth in unrighteousness because what may be known of God is manifest in them. So they have the ability to know about God and see God and talk to God. They got it. It's not like it's some mystery. It is manifest in them, and they can just look. They have to choose. Like, no, I think that's stupid. But their instinct as a child is to believe there's a God. That's not like some weird thing. So it's manifest in them. For God has shown it to them. Since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen. Look at the stars, look at the sun. Clearly somebody created all of that. It's not a mystery. Being understood by the things that are made. So we're made. We understood God created those things. Even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So all he's requiring of everybody since Noah, acknowledge that there's a God. Just say, I believe there's a God. I know there's a God out there, and I want to know him. That's right. So he's saying that much they could do. Now in Romans chapter 2, he then goes and Paul talks about, okay, so there's the regular Gentiles who all God is requiring of them is just to acknowledge him, and they refuse to do that. Then there are the Jews. Here's what it's requiring of them. So in Romans chapter 2, verse 12, it says, for as many as have sinned without the law, so the people who don't know anything about the law, God never gave them the law. God only gave the law to Moses and that group. So for as many as have sinned without the law will also perish without the law. So you don't have to have the law if you're doing bad, and as many of us sinned in the law will be judged by the law. So if God gave you the law and you're not doing it, that's not good. If God didn't give you the law, but you're not acknowledging him, the wages of sin is still death. That has never changed from the beginning of time. And God has given the solution. You don't have to die, right? You don't have to die. So Hebrews chapter 8, verse 6 says, but now he has obtained a more excellent ministry. Talking about Jesus has obtained a more excellent ministry. Now that he's died, now that he's gone up to heaven and shed his blood on the mercy seat, he has a more excellent ministry than the ministers of the law, the priests of the law. He says, as he is also mediator of a better covenant, which was established on better promises. So there was a law given to Moses. Jesus came under that law and fulfilled it, and now he's actually given us a better covenant. So we're getting it from Adam to Noah, from Noah to Abraham, Abraham to Moses, Moses to Jesus. We're from Jesus on, right? We have a better covenant. We also have a covenant too. But it's better, establishing better promises. In John chapter 13, verse 34, Jesus says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. That's the whole commandment. So you don't have to memorize all 636 things that I gave to Moses and them. You just have to do one. Remember, Jesus had said, what's the greatest commandment? Yes, love the Lord your God with all your heart. And the second commandment is just like it, love your neighbor as yourself. So he's saying to them, here's the new commandment. You don't have to worry about all of the law. Just love one another in the way that I have loved you. And then you'll fulfill the law. If you're doing that every day, if you are loving your neighbor, you won't stab your neighbor, you won't rob your neighbor, you won't commit adultery with a neighbor, you won't do all. If you just love that other person next to you, and who's my neighbor? The Samaritan, the homeless person. And he said, the person that you hate, the person from the other party, the person from the other country, the person, from the other economic group, the person from the other race, they're your neighbor. They're all your neighbor. Love them. So you just have one thing to do. We're back to Adam. Hey, Adam, you just have one thing to do. Don't eat that tree. Eat of all the other trees. That's all. So Jesus said, I'm just giving you one commandment. Just love your neighbor. Love everybody the way that I have loved you. And you will have fulfilled the whole law. You don't have to worry about memorizing anything. So that's our thing. So we're going to be held responsible for that. Just like Adam was held responsible for his. Noah to Abraham, they were held responsible for just believing there's a God, right? From Abraham to Moses, and I'll get under the blessings of Abraham. They had their own specific thing. And Moses is telling them that God gave us a commandment just for us. He did not give it to our fathers. He gave it to us who are standing here. This is just for us and the people that will come from us. And Paul's saying the law was for the Jews. It's not that we don't have a law. Jesus gave us a law. It was love your neighbor as the way that I've loved you. And so he didn't give us the law that he gave Moses. He gave us our own law that we have to stick to. So here's what he says through Moses. So Moses is saying, here's what God said to us. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 6. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of bondage. This is him summing up what we said in Exodus. You shall have no other gods before me. So again, just reminding you, he's talking about idolatry. This is the sin that's going to get the curse passed on to the third and fourth generation. Not the other sins. I'll show you. You shall have no other gods before me. Number 1, verse 7. Next verse. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that's in heaven above, or that's in earth beneath, or that is the water under the earth. Next verse. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. So you hate me if you made an idol. You don't hate me if you're out of money and you need to steal some medicine. That doesn't mean you hate God. So that sin doesn't get a curse that follows it. You don't hate me if somebody almost ran you over on the freeway and you curse them out and flip them off. That doesn't mean you hate God. So, but if you make an idol, yeah, that means you're choosing an idol over God. So idolatry is the sin, the only sin that gets this particular punishment. It's real specific. So if the people want to attribute any kind of sin from the past, oh, that's a curse that could have been passed. Nope, there's only one type, which is idolatry for those who hate me. But he says, I'm due showing mercy to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. So if you love me, the curse doesn't get passed down. If you hate me, it will. The consequences of it in two ways. I'm going to put the consequences on your kids, but they're going to see what you did. They're going to imitate you. And that's going to go from 3-4 generations until they finally get it, that we need to stop doing this. And that happens in most cases. Let's say there's an alcoholic in your family, really bad alcoholic. A child may see that behavior and imitate that behavior. That next child may see that. By the time it gets to the 3rd or 4th generation, they will say, this has been going on in our family for there, and this is bad. We need to stop this. It takes like 3 or 4 generations for people to realize that killed great granddaddy and it killed granddaddy, and people will see. In that case, they're imitating the behavior that is causing. It's not, well, your great grandfather was an alcoholic, so even though you're not, sorry, I'm just going to curse you. You're just going to be under the curse because, your great grandfather was not alcoholic. So you get even though you aren't, you're just going to get the repercussions of his sin. It's going to come on you. Now, again, it was specifically idolatry that was going to be passed on. Why do I know that? In Deuteronomy chapter 5:11, he gives the next commandment. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. So don't take the name in vain. It doesn't say, and in the 3rd and 4th generation, I will visit it on you. Nope. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 12. Observe the Sabbath day. Keep it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Doesn't say, and if you don't, you'll be all the curses. 5:13, 16. Honor your father and your mother, as the Lord God has commanded you, that your days may be long, and that it may be well with you in the land which your Lord your God has given you. He's saying, I'm going to give your mother and your father wisdom for you. So if you honor them and listen to them, they may not even be able to take care of their own lives, but they'll know stuff that you shouldn't do. They'll sit you down and say, you know what, you need to stay away from that boy, or you better be careful. They will just have wisdom for you. And if you honor them and listen and go, you know what? A mother and father said something made all the sense in the world. If you listen, it will make your days long. When you don't listen, your days will be short because they will have wisdom for you if you listen, and some parents today are afraid to sit their kids down and tell them anything, but you really have wisdom for your kids. Even if you think, well, my life's a mess, so I can't, but trust me, God will give you wisdom for your kids. Okay, you shall not murder. Doesn't say, and if you do, it'll be the consequences will pass on your children for 4 generations. They don't even have to be a murderer. They're just going to get the consequences. They're going to end up in prison. They don't even know why they're in prison. You shall not commit adultery. The next verse. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. So the 10 Commandments, the only one where he goes on and on is the first one, because it's all about idolatry. This is what's going to really mess you up, is idolatry. The other things, believe it or not, I can help you with. But if you're serving another God, I can't help you. You've cut me off from your life. You're not listening to me at all. So this is the one I'm going to really have consequences for in order to scare you out of doing it. Specifically, you Jewish people, this is for you. You're under the law. Paul said later, if you're not under the law, this does not apply to you. You have your own law that you're going to get punished for. This applies to us. Okay. Now, did some people take this and apply this to everything, like Jesus' disciples? Oh, he's born blind, so somebody must have sinned. Is it just any old sin, or is it just idolatry? Some people were thinking it's any old sin, because they read that verse and they don't read the context normally. So in Ezekiel chapter 18, very important, Ezekiel chapter 18, verse 1, it says, the word of the Lord came to me again, saying, what do you mean when you use this proverb concerning the land of Israel, saying, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge? So what do you mean when you use that? You're trying to say because the fathers have done something that the consequences are going to fall on the children? You're just making that a general proverb applying to everything? That the fathers' teeth have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge? He says, as I live, verse 3, as I live, says the Lord God, you shall no longer use this proverb in Israel. Don't say that. Do not say what the fathers have done is going to fall on the children. The fathers ate sour grape, and so the children's teeth go, oh, yeah, I said in it. Do not say that anymore. He says, behold, all souls are mine, meaning individually. Because what you're saying is that soul, that child's soul belongs to the father. And the father's actions are going to affect that child. He says, no. That soul is mine. He has to deal with me. That child is mine, the father belongs to me. He says, behold, all souls are mine. The soul of the father as well as the soul of the son is mine. So the soul who sins shall die. I hold each person individually accountable. You're not going to die for your father's sins, for your grandfather's sins. I don't play that. He said, but if a man is just and does what is lawful and right, and it goes and lists all the things. So if a man does what is right, and he lists them in verse 7 and 8 and 9, all these different verses, all these different things. If he does this, if he does this, if he does this, he says, verse 9, if he has walked in my statute and kept my judgments faithfully, he is just, and he shall surely live, says the Lord my God. So somebody, there's not an innocent person walking around who's under a curse. If you're doing what's right, then you're not under a curse. You're not under a curse that happened 5 generations back. If you're doing what's right, you're good. I'm judging you by what you do. I'm not cursing you because of what somebody did 4 generations ago. Ezekiel chapter 18, verse 14 and 17. So the same chapter, verse 14. If, however, this good person begets a son who sees all the sins which his father has done and considers, but does not do likewise. So, I'm sorry. So the sinful guy begets a good son. And that son or daughter sees what the mother or father has done and doesn't do them, and doesn't and does not do likewise. Verse 17, and it lists all the things that he doesn't do. He doesn't do this, doesn't do that, does it in verse 15 and 16. Verse 17 says, "Who has withdrawn his hand from the poor and not received usury or increase." Withdrawn his hand from the poor means he's not slapping the poor down. He's not knocking the poor down. He's withdrawn his hand, and he's not receiving usury or increase. He's not overtaxing them and trying to get money from them, but has executed my judgments and walked in my statutes. He shall not die for the iniquity of his father. He shall surely live. So don't tell people anymore, you're going to have to pay for what your father did. That doesn't apply. If you're doing good, then I'm not cursing you for what has gone before you. If you're doing bad, that's why that's happening to you. Surprise. If you're doing bad stuff, that's why that stuff's happening to you. It's you. Exodus chapter 18, verse 19. Yet you say, well, why should the son not bear the guilt of the father? Isn't that what we've been taught? He says, because the son has done what is lawful and right and has kept all my statute and observed him, he shall surely live. He's not going to pay. The soul who sins shall die. The son shall not bear the guilt of the father, nor the father bear the guilt of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wickedness shall be upon himself. So he says, don't say that anymore. Don't. But I can understand why they said it. Because he says, if you've done this sin, I will visit the iniquity. But he was talking specifically only about idolatry. He wasn't, if you, whatever, you get drunk in the middle of the night, sorry, your grandchildren are going to pay for that because that's how I am. I just make people pay for stuff they didn't do. It's like, no, I don't do that. The righteousness of the righteousness shall be upon him. The wickedness of the wickedness will be upon him. I deal with everybody individually, period. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 29. In those days, this is a different prophet. In those days, this is saying coming up. In those days they shall say no more, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. You're not even going to be able to say that anymore coming up, because there's Messiah's coming, and that I'm going to do away with the whole law at that point. Even so, you guys are supposed to follow the law. I've written it down for Moses. Don't do this, don't do. But I'm just not going to get rid of the law. So you don't even say that. You won't even have a reason to say it. But everyone shall die for his own iniquity. This is Jeremiah 31:30. Every man who eats sour grapes, his teeth will be set on edge. If you eat the grapes, your teeth going to be set on edge, not your child's. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Okay, so we're not under the old covenant anymore. Even if you're Jewish, he's saying, I'm going to make a new deal, right? So you don't have to worry about the law. Deuteronomy 24:16. Fathers shall be put to death. No, fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor shall children be put to death for their fathers. A person shall be put to death for his own sin. So your consequences come on you for you personally. So the disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Because they're still believing if something bad is happening to a person, it must be because of sin. Sometimes it is. Sometimes God is giving you consequences because you did something, but he's not giving you consequences because your father did something. Now, sometimes you are living under the consequences of, like, if your father got drunk and burned down the house, you are living under the consequences of his choices, but you're not cursed. No one has to break a curse on you. If you know whatever sins your father, your parents have committed, you might be now having to live as a child under those repercussions. But once you move out, whatever happens to you from then on, that's your deal. So yes, there are consequences that fall on us because our parents may have done whatever they've done, and so now we're living under those consequences. But there's not a curse that's going to follow us around the rest of our life, that we have to go somewhere and someone has to break a curse on us. 4 generations ago, your parent did that, and that's why these bad things are happening to you. Jesus says, no, that's not why those bad things are happening on you. Is it always because of sin, though? If something bad is happening to you, does that mean, well, that must be because of sin? No. But we want to think that sometimes. Some bad thing happened, well, you must have sinned somehow. So it's not always because of sin. In Luke chapter 13, I'm sorry. So Jesus answered, said, neither this man nor his parents have sinned. That's not why this is happening to him. There's no sin. It wasn't his parents. It wasn't even this man. That's not, because Jesus could have said, but somebody somewhere sinned, because bad things don't just happen to people for no reason. He didn't say that. He answered the question. Nope, there wasn't sin. Sin had nothing to do with it. In fact, in Luke chapter 13, verse 1, it says, there were present at that season some who told Jesus about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. So they had brought the sacrifices to Pilate, and he had killed some Galileans and mingled their blood with the blood sacrifices. Total, evil, crazy, depraved man. And Jesus answered and said to them in verse 2, do you suppose that these Galileans were worse sinners than all other Galileans because they suffered such things? Is that what you're thinking? Well, they must have been really bad. And that's like, houses catching on fire in a neighborhood, and certain houses catch on fire and certain houses don't. Well, they must have been sinners over there because they must be good people over there. And Jesus, that's not necessarily why that happened. So don't always attribute, well, you must have been a sinner because that's why you got in a car accident. This person avoided it. So therefore, like the other day when the woman was coming down La Brea and hit those people, well, they must have been sinners. No. So he's saying, don't assume that. Are you assuming that that's why that happened to them? He says, or verse 4 in Luke chapter 13, or those 18 on whom the tower in Siloam fell and killed them. Do you think that they were worse sinners than all of the men who dwelt in Jerusalem? Just because they must have been really, is that your thinking that it's always sin and that's why that bad thing happened to the person and that good thing happened to that person? Well, look how blessed he is. He must be a good person. No, not necessarily. We don't know why God is doing what we're doing, but we can't always account it to sin. Acts chapter 28, verse 3. But when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks, remember Paul got shipwrecked? Paul had warned them, please let's not do this. And they weren't listening to Paul. And we need to just stop because a storm is coming. Oh, we can make it. Okay. So they end up getting shipwrecked. Like the ship was just broken in pieces. And they're on this island. And it says in Acts chapter 28, verse 3, but when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened onto his hand, right? So he didn't know there was a snake in the sticks, and he lit the fire, and the fire, even the snake said, whoo, that's hot, that's hell hot. Let me get out of here. So when the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, no doubt this man is a murderer, whom though he has escaped the sea, yet justice just not allowed to live. So he survived that shipwreck, but the snake caught up with him and said, ha, caught you. You thought you were going to get away. Clearly he must be a murderer because that's the only reason why a snake would do that. It says, but he shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. And now, so why did that happen? Because he's a murderer. No, let me tell you, a revival broke loose. And so maybe that's why God, sometimes things happen to people for their testimony, because that's what happened with Paul. On that island, they saw that snake bit that man, and it just dropped off in the fire. What God do you serve? Well, let me tell you. So sometimes it is the test. We don't know God. In John chapter 11, verse 4, when they come to Jesus and tell him about Lazarus being sick. It says, when Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. So he's not going to end up dying from this sickness. Now, he will die eventually, but not from this sickness. It's actually going to bring God glory. This story is going to be told forever about Lazarus. Everybody just mention Lazarus anywhere on this earth. Oh, I know the story of Lazarus and how God came out of the tomb. So this will be a story that will be, and God will get glory from this. So this is the ultimate reason, the ultimate consequence of this action is God getting glory. Why? But we just know what ultimately is going to happen with it. So Jesus says to them, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. So we don't know the reason, but I do know what the ultimate outcome will be, which is two different things. I don't know why. I know what the outcome is going to be. The glory of God is going to be revealed in him. Now, them having this intellectual discussion would be just like two Christians walking down the street and seeing a homeless person or seeing a woman destitute with a baby and having this. I wonder why this woman is destitute like that, and that poor baby starving to death. And you think it's the government? It's all this government overreach. No, she probably it's racial thing. It's institutionalized racism, and they just walk on by the woman and never do anything. Not that every single time you see a homeless person, you have to do something. But I'm saying instead of meeting the person's need and waiting, praying, Lord, am I supposed to do something? They're having this intellectual discussion about it and just walk on by. Look, that house is on fire. Well, I wonder what starts house fires. What do you think? Don't call the 911. Don't just have a discussion about, I wonder where this came from. Oh, isn't that something? And don't people do that today? They get on Facebook and they're having big arguments about what's wrong. Poverty is here because of the and no, poverty, it's all your party's fault. No, it's your party. Are you giving any money to the poor? Are you trying to do? No, but we have these incredible discussions and hate each other. And does that solve anything? So Jesus is saying, you are sitting here talking about why the man. I'm just telling you, it's happened so that the works of God should be revealed in him. I'm here to cure. We're going to do something about this. Your discussion is in vain. Remember Job. In Job chapter 38, Job had a bunch of bad stuff happen to him, and his friends came, Job's comforters. Let me make you feel better, Job, by telling you how this is all your fault. And Christians will want to do that. They'll call you up and say, well, because you didn't pray in the throne room. You prayed in the church, but you got to pray. Well, no, you didn't declare and decree. Instead of saying, oh, my heart's just with you, bless your heart. They should have just shut up and just comforted Job because of all this stuff happened. But they kept accusing Job, And Job said, I really didn't do anything. I really didn't do anything. Well, you must have done something. And he says, I didn't do anything. And finally, Job, first he said, I didn't do anything. Secondly, he said, well, God is unrighteous. I know I'm not. So if you're trying to pick between me and God who's unrighteous, point the finger at that way. And then God showed up and said, let me holler at you for just a minute. So in Job chapter 38, verse 1, it says, then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Meaning, you messing things up. You're darkening counsel, and you don't even know what you're talking about. He says, now prepare yourself like a man, and I will question you, and you'll answer me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you had, when I was just creating this whole thing, and since you know so much about why things happen, and I didn't see you. Where were you? Were you at lunch? So, and he goes on for 2 chapters. You know you've messed up, Job, because you don't know what you're talking about. Finally, in Job chapter 40, verse 1, it says, moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, shall the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Are you going to correct me? He who rebukes God, let him answer it, since you're rebuking me and accusing me of messing up. And then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am vile. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. I need to just shut up. Once I have spoken when I said I didn't do nothing wrong. It says, but I will not answer. Yes, twice when I said it was your fault, but I will not proceed any further. So I'm done. Thank you. Zip it. I'll go sleep now. So we don't need to sit sometimes and, Lord, why is this happening? God, if we need to know, God will come to us and tell us. Otherwise, let's be about God's business and saying, Lord, what's the answer to this? Instead of having intellectual discussion, Lord, what do you want to use me in some way to help solve this problem? Is there something I'm supposed to do? And because Jesus says, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. This is verse 4 of John chapter 9. Because the night is coming when no man work. So instead of spending my time, it's day. Let's go in the day while there's still light, and let's move and do what God. Let's talk to God. Say, hey, God, what should be done? Instead of having these conversations and making up. Well, someone sinned. Well, you don't know that. Let's spend our time not worrying about the sin. Let's spend our time worrying about the cure, because that's what God wants us to do. And if there's something that we need to know further, He will let us know. Okay, so I'm ending there. But we will go on with John chapter, because this particular controversy of killing this blind man, and he hasn't even healed him yet. It's only verse 4. He's just corrected the disciples and saying, let's do something about it. This is the controversy that just lights everything off. Okay, so thank you so much for tuning in today, if that's what you call it. Well, thanks, all you guys. I'm glad it was making sense to you. Or you're just saying nice things. Because that's how you are, just nice. Thanks for tuning in on Sundays. We're in the book of Exodus. And this Sunday at church, I'll be preaching the book of Samuel. I'm on the 3rd chapter of Samuel. So Sunday, there's the double header, book of Exodus, book of Samuel. And then next week, back on John. Again, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.